Welcome to another SketchUp workshop where today we'll be looking at the SketchUp interface, which we'll touch on at the start of each workshop just to make sure everyone knows how to modify and place toolbars and just do some basic modifications to the SketchUp interface. We'll cover some basic skills and concepts regarding creating geometry and controlling that, doing it accurately, so we'll try a tool called the tape measure tool as well. Any questions or problem solving that you'll need to do along the way, let me know as well. And no doubt many people will be joining via the recording. And I always like to recommend a few links as we go along through the content. The SketchUp website itself has a huge range of good free resources. That's where I go to do all my problem solving. So just literally sketchup.com or learn.sketchup.com and also blog.sketchup.com. There's a whole community of SketchUp users out there, all answering each other's questions, sharing hints, tips, and resources. And on the Learn part of the SketchUp website, and I'll just share that link in the discussion forum or the chat section here as well. They provide a lot of good free training resources for all SketchUp users of all levels. There's some specific to interior design and some just general and quite broad, so absolutely make use of all the good free resources there. They've got things on fundamentals and all the way through to intermediate and more advanced. They also have their own YouTube channel and the SketchUp Essentials series that are on lynda.com are hugely useful. There's one for each version, 2016, 17, 18, 19, so whichever version you're using, there's really good training resources there for you that you can stop and pause and play along with at any time. Another tip is to always use a 3-button mouse. And Nikki, I'll just check with you, do you have a 3-button mouse that you can use? Left click, right click, and either a scroll wheel, the wheel is better, or the touch sensitive trackpad in the middle. Great. There's a lot of functionality built into the wheel itself. The touch-sensitive trackpad in the middle for Mac users, if it's the 2 buttons plus the touch-sensitive part in the middle, it's also good, but the wheel has a couple of other functions built into it, as it does for AutoCAD and various other CAD applications as well, so definitely worth buying one. I just had to replace one of my 3-button mice this week, and it was a $12 replacement, so good investment all round. As you can see from the resources here, you can scroll on the wheel to zoom in and out, click and drag on the actual wheel itself to orbit, and the shift key plus click and drag on the wheel will bring up the pan tool, and to double click on the mouse wheel, most people don't know you can double click on your mouse wheel, will also just recenter your view and take you, whatever you've built so far, back in the center of the screen. If you get lost in 3D space, which is very easy to do in SketchUp. When you first open the software, you'll often be prompted to choose a template. It doesn't really matter too much which template you choose, as long as it's got millimeters as the units, so double check that, and we will also have a look at how we modify our units as we go along. There's model info and preferences in SketchUp where we can modify and change our units to make sure that we're using decimal and millimeters, because being American software, there's a lot of options for feet and inches in there, and it's easy to get the scale wrong if you do that. But everything is changeable and modifiable in SketchUp, as with most programs, so we'll look at various ways we can control our working environment as we go along. So we're going to have a look at all the tools and interface that we can use with SketchUp and how to modify our workspace. So for Mac users watching the recording, go to your View menu, hover over Tool, Palettes, and then click on the large tool set. And this will activate a large tool set, which you'll see pop up on the left of the screen here in a minute. So it's View menu, Tool Palettes, and large tool set. And another way to modify your work environment for Mac users is to right-click in the empty part of the top toolbar, just in the empty grey area there, and click on Customize Toolbars. So for Mac users, when you do that, it's different to PC. You'll see a large drop down that will appear on your screen, and there's lots of good useful tools in there. A couple that I recommend placing onto your screen. So this is literally a drag and drop format for Mac users, where you can drag any of the tools on the Getting Started toolbar up the top there that are already on your large tool set, which you'll see on the left there. And you'll see that once I get into application sharing as well. So any tools that duplicate there, you can drag them from the top toolbar back into here, and they just disappear in a puff of smoke if this top one gets too busy. So I recommend taking the undo and redo button, placing it near the top left somewhere in a standard position like most software. There's a little layers pull down that you can place somewhere in the top center of your top toolbar for Mac users as well. And also the little row of houses called the standard views toolbar, I like to drag that somewhere over onto the top right, and that allows you to quickly swap between plan view, elevation views, and various 3D angles. So Mac interface is very much drag and drop, and you activate that just by right-clicking in the top right part of your screen there on the empty grey part of the toolbar, or on your view menu you can choose Customize Toolbar there as well. 4 additional items which are called tray items, which can pop up on the right of your screen there. For Mac users, that's straight under your window menu, and you can tick scenes, styles, and layers from that list. Are very, very handy to put up, and they'll pop up there. You can collapse them and expand them, and you can stack them together on the right of your screen there. And the way to manipulate toolbars for PC users, so Nikki, I'll just get you to check this as well as you go along, which toolbars you can see. It's the view menu again. View menu controls a lot of the things that we see on the screen, as the name might suggest. So view menu, and click on toolbars. That will open up this toolbars dialog box here, and you can tick or untick any toolbars that you want. So I recommend unticking the Get Started toolbar, which will have a few tools across the top. It's just a basic Getting Started toolbar. And then tick the large tool set. That's the one that'll pop up on the left of your screen here. Tick layers. That'll bring up that same pull down that Mac users would have dragged and dropped to the top of their screen. So large tool set, layers, standard, which has some useful buttons like undo and redo as well. And a views toolbar, which again it's called standard views on a Mac, but views on a PC, that's the little row of houses here. So if you tick on those, large toolset, layers, standard, and views, and then click on close, you should have a toolbar, a set of toolbars that looks a bit like the ones on the screen here, with a large toolset down the left, and row of houses, your layers pull down, and your standard toolbar featuring undo and redo. So Nikki, do you want to put up a green tick if you can then see those things on your screen, if you've managed to manipulate those into position? There's no real right or wrong when it comes to, that's great, you've got those showing now, comes to placing toolbars, but they're a good standard set that's very useful for interior design. So it's good to check back in with these menus as well and see what other toolbars are there as you get more advanced. Things like shadows can be very handy once you get you know, a more complete building going on. You can do really simple and quick sun studies. You can turn the sun shadows on and off. Normally when you're looking inside a building for interior design, you turn them off, but if you're going to do some exterior views or you want to see sun and shadow coming in through a window, there's that toolbar and others to explore once you get more advanced. And just remember that with everything in SketchUp, as with most software, you can manipulate and change things as you go along. So now under the window menu, we want to show the same tray items that we were talking about on the Mac a minute ago. So things like materials, styles, layers, and also scenes I would tick for this one. So under window and default tray on a PC, they just pop up straight under the window menu on a Mac. But window and default tray, just make sure that the tray is not hidden. You can toggle between show and hide, and just tick a few of those layers, styles, and scenes, and materials is always good to keep there. But again, they can be hidden and shown at any time. Okay, just a reminder as well that when you want to populate your models, and we might get to do a bit of this in application sharing today or not, is that under your file menu, or that might just be the Apple symbol on a Mac, the 3D warehouse is in there, and you can click on Get Models, where you can find a range of standard furniture, appliances, floor finishes, textures. All the big brands are in there these days. You can find a nice Bosch dishwasher or some lovely Italian Vitra sofas and other things. There's so many brands that are contributing models and textures, and standard ranges. Corian and Laminex have their standard textures in there as well. So SketchUp is, because it's become such an industry standard program, lots of suppliers are contributing to the 3D warehouse as well. As do everyday users of SketchUp. If you build a chair or a house or something, or a light fitting or something like that, or a cupboard that might be useful to other users, SketchUp will prompt you to share that in the 3D warehouse. It does mean that some of the stuff in there is not always amazing quality. A lot of it is, but you've got to be careful when you import things. All right, so we'll jump into application sharing and explore some basic and then some intermediate concepts in SketchUp. So I'll just start up application sharing now. And just put up a green tick if you can see my screen there, Nikki, as well. You can see the SketchUp platform there clearly. First thing we're going to start with, great, you've got the screen there. I'd like you to model a basic shape like this on your screen. It's always good to start with something like a floor surface to kick off a model. It gives us a starting point and some geometry to work with. So I've made a 5 by 8 meter rectangle here, and I've put some dimensions on it. So we'll build that quickly. I'll take you through that process again. I'll just delete the original one there. So using your rectangle tool, it's always good to start at the origin there. I used the move tool to move the person out of the way in SketchUp. I recommend leaving the person visible on the screen. Doesn't matter if they're still in the floor area that you're going to build on at the moment, but just for scale. It's a pretty quick way to see that you're building things at a sensible scale, which will be a hint towards whether you're using the right units or not as well. So with your rectangle tool, you want to do a single click on the origin of the axis there, and it's a click and release. Then drag the rectangle out in the direction that you want, and then type in the directions, or the dimensions, sorry. So I'm going to type in 8,000, 5,000. So any typing you do will automatically end up in the bottom right dimensions part of your screen. So 8,000, 5,000, hit enter. You'll get a rectangle, and we're going to push-pull that, give it some thickness, maybe 300, and then enter. So, Nikki, I'll give you a second to do that one, and then put up a green tick once you've done that. So it's just the rectangle tool, click on the junction of the 3 axes there, drag in the direction that you want, then type in the dimension, always hit enter to finish your commands. We'll give it some thickness. We'll talk about the importance of grouping, things like layers as well. Alright, good work. Give it some thickness as shown as well. And then what we'll do, once you've got the solid box there, and you can always, I tend to just move the human figure out of the way, but keep them in the model, so either on the red or green axis. You can just move the person a little bit out of the way. But I do recommend keeping the human figure visible for scale. So once you've got the box there, there's a few different ways you can select things in SketchUp. You can click and hold your mouse button down and swipe to the left or swipe to the right. They have different functions. A right swipe will select only whole objects within the swipe area. A left swipe will select anything that box crosses. But another way to select whole groups of connected geometry is a triple click. So 3 clicks in a row. And you'll see all the connected geometry becomes selected, then right click, go to make group. So you can make a group out of that, and then just test that it's a group by doing a single click on it. So I'll give you a minute to do that one, Nikki, and then put up a green tick if that, once you've grouped it. And we'll create some layers. Good speedy work there. And for anyone watching the recording as well, pause, watch back, follow the tips at your own pace as needed. So another thing we're going to do, just make sure your layers tray is showing on your screen. I'll just minimize a couple of these others. As I was saying before, whether it's Mac or PC, they can be expanded and collapsed at any time. You access them under your window menu, straight under the window menu on a Mac or window, and default tray on PC. So just make sure layers is showing for now. So we've got a layers pull down list at the top, but that sits separate to the layers tray as well. To create new layers, all you've got to do is click on the plus symbol and type in the name of the layer that you want to create. So I recommend creating a few, and it's literally the same process each time. Click on the plus symbol and type in a name for your layer. Start by doing one for floor, one for walls, one for furniture, and then put up a tick once you've done that. It's a nice simple process. And to delete any layers, if there's one that you don't want anymore, the one I just created was layer 1. I don't need that at the moment. So you can always highlight a layer and click on the minus symbol. Now, using layers is just a way of grouping things together. I would put all my walls on a single layer, or maybe I would separate my external walls and my internal walls. I tend to also separate loose furniture and built-in cabinetry, for instance. I would often create a layer for something like plants as well, appliances, that type of thing. And you just build your layer list as you go. I think, even for a large project, a layer list shouldn't get too long. If you're doing a whole hotel or something, you'll probably end up with 40 layers. But you don't really want more than that. You want a visible list that you can scroll through and just separate things into simple families. And we'll look at why that's important in a minute. So well done for getting a few layers created there. Now, how do we place something onto a layer? Because it's grouped, we can do a single click on that object, and then we can right click and go to Entity Info. When you click on Entity Info, the tray for Entity Info will open up. You'll probably see it on the right-hand side of your screen there. You may need to expand or collapse it if it looks too small. And you can place anything that you've got selected. You can choose a layer for it there. So you can click on that pull down and place it on the floor layer. So have a go at doing that. The process is to select the object, right click, go to Entity Info, where we can find out anything about any object that we select, if it's a group, if it's a component, if it's not, and then from the pull down list, which appears there, we can place that object on a layer. Perfect. Now, what we'll do, just to reiterate that process as well, we can click on our lovely assistant Stacey here on our screen. If you've got a human figure somewhere in your model, you'll also see I've already got Entity Info open. It'll stay open until you close it again. You can place her, you see the name there, you see some basic info about it. You can place her on a layer called People. So if you need to quickly create another layer, you can click on the plus sign and do that, and then you can put her on that People layer. What we'll do in just a second as well is we'll create a couple of walls for our space here. So we'll use a couple of tools to do that. We'll be checking with accuracy. Modeling with control and accuracy is a key concept in SketchUp, so we want to make sure that we're on top of that. And once we've got items placed on a few layers, we then use our layers list to untick or tick layers to control their visibility. So I can untick the People layer there to hide Stacey, or tick it again. So you can populate your models. They can become fairly busy. You don't want a lot of redundant stuff in your model because the file size will get too big. But then when you don't want to see certain things, you just hide them. You can imagine when you build a whole house or any building, you don't always want to see the ceiling, the roof, the lighting. You want to be able to turn things on and off as you go. Also, things like plants will have a lot of edges, a lot of 3D, a lot of lines and edges, which just all of those have a memory associated with them on the computer, a certain number of kilobytes or bytes. So hiding really complex things like plants and furniture once they're in there can make your model move and zoom and orbit much quicker. Good idea to save your work at this stage as well. Just save what you've done, call it workshop exercises or give it a simple name, save it somewhere logical on your computer. So we'll build some walls for our space here. I might just move Stacey again, just off to the side. When I move things just out of the way, and I wouldn't do that with furniture, I'd just hide them. I'm just being careful that I'm moving it on the red axis or on the green axis. Otherwise it's very easy to accidentally move them up into space and accidentally lift them off the ground and things like that. So moving things, just look at your axis guides as you go along. So I always recommend when you start a project and you build the floor, for instance, it's a good idea as the next thing to do to put some dimensions on that. So the dimension tool is halfway down the large tool set on the right-hand side, just next to the tape measure tool. We'll use that in a second. So it's a good idea to click on the dimensions, click on an end point there, and then another end point. Always read the bottom left of your screen. You're seeing there down the bottom of my screen, it's prompting me. It's saying select second point for linear dimension. It's always prompting you for the next click that it wants, and it's now telling me bottom left of my screen to place the dimension. So there's 3 clicks for a dimension. So click on the dimension tool, hover over an end point. SketchUp by default will highlight end points and midpoints in lines as default. So you want to click on an end point. It's a click and release as well, not a click and drag. Click and release, do a second click, and then drag the dimension where you want. Sometimes it'll want to drag on funny angles up, down, or wherever. You just got to manipulate your mouse. You can tap your arrow keys as well. So put up a green tick once you've managed to place a dimension or two. It's always good at the start of a project, especially if I draw a house slab or something like that. I'll generally pin dimensions just as a checkpoint onto it at the start to make sure that I haven't accidentally clicked or made a quick little typo in the wrong spot. Then all my walls depend on that and other things. So it's a good first thing to do on a project, just to check your basic dimensions so you're not building geometry on top of something that's slightly the wrong size, which is very easy to do, trust me. All right, good work. So you can also, and it doesn't matter whether you want to do this now or later, but you can also create a dimensions layer there. You can select your dimensions and place them on that layer if you like as well. Good to do that at some point in the process. Good to generally place things on those as you go. The reason why we group things as we go as well is because of the concept of sticky geometry in SketchUp, which I'll just quickly demonstrate. Actually, I'll give you something to do first. I'll give you some walls to build first, then I'll demonstrate sticky geometry. So the tape measure tool is just next to the dimension tool. So click on the tape measure tool. It's best not to hover over end points or midpoints with the tape measure because then it's a slightly different function. It can give you reference points rather than guidelines. You just want to hover with the tape measure somewhere on the left-hand side line of your slab and click on it. Again, drag away so we get that rubber band effect. I'm going to exaggerate my dragging there a bit just to make sure the direction is right on the red axis. Then I can type in a dimension of how far I want that to go. So I'm going to type in 200 and enter. So have a go at doing that. And I'm just going to tilt my screen a bit here so you can see that guideline clearly. A good way to set out your projects is to use the tape measure tool to set out some basic guidelines for things like walls, and then you can just trace over them. So I'm going to do that again on the top edge there, or the back edge of that slab. Is just with the tape measure tool, click and release, drag in the direction that you want, type in a dimension, then hit enter. And I'm just going to build a couple of walls here in a second. Once you've got the geometry there, it's just always worth checking that your slab is grouped, because we don't want the walls to stick to the slab, we want them to stay separate. SketchUp has sticky geometry, as I said, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. There's a couple of ways to create walls here. I could use the rectangle tool, draw one rectangle, then another rectangle. They will have a join line in between them. And then I could get rid of that join later if I wanted to. So I could use a couple of rectangles there, or I can use the line tool and I can just trace where I want to go. So if I trace those back edges first, and actually your pen setting might be set to draw continuously or to do individual lines. So the choice is yours, but trace over those lines. I just have to zoom in there to really look at that point. Good thing to note is you can zoom and scroll with your mouse wheel as you are halfway through a command, and it won't break the command. That's why the scroll wheel is the preferred tool for that. So I'll just make sure they're all joined up, all my line segments there. And so I can see I've got a face there, essentially, that L-shaped face, which all those lines are joined together. You can use the rectangles, like I said, or use the line tool to trace over your guidelines. Then we're going to use the push-pull tool, which is about a bit over a third of the way down on your large tool set. It's the main modelling tool, push-pull. We're going to push-pull up to a height of, let's say, 2700 for the wall. Could be 2400 depending on the project. And then what I'm going to do is group that together again. Why we group things, and if you just want to have a go at drawing that wall as well, even if you just do one side of the L, it's fine. If we don't group things together, what happens is I might be building some lovely furniture next to the wall here, and what we're going to find is that as we build more things, they will, by their very nature, stick together in SketchUp. I'll just explain this here. If I then want to select my box, it's going to select all of those connected faces. So even if I only wanted to select some of those faces, say with my box here, if I try and move that now, because I've modelled it against the wall, see how that sticky geometry pulls the wall out of shape? So if we don't group things together first, we'll have objects sticking together. It makes it very hard to edit our models later. Okay, so that is why it's a good habit to get into. Once you've built something, whether that's your walls or whatever it is, to do that function of triple click, or use other selection functions, but triple click is good to just quickly select all the connected geometry that you just built. Right click and group that together. Now, to modify groups, you need to then double click on them. I can't put a door or a window in those walls without double clicking on them. So, but once you do double click on them, you can modify them in any way that you like. Thickness, height, etc. But just remember that once something's grouped, you do need to double click on it. So materials, it's good to be obviously aware of your materials. So if we just want to quickly add a couple of materials to our model here, we can double click on our floor slab, and as soon as you click on the paint bucket tool, which is right up near the top left of the large tool set, click on your paint bucket tool, it'll automatically open up the materials tray, and you've got palettes of existing materials in there. We will look in a future workshop at importing materials as well. The SketchUp library has some good textures, but it's limited, but it's easy to import under the file menu and import good quality JPEGs or other types of image formats to use in your models. So for this floor, you'll find the timbers are very limited in the SketchUp library. So maybe we'll put a stone or maybe even a concrete type texture. There's a couple of asphalt and concrete textures in there. It's a good thing to just, actually I'll try a different one there. to always double click on your groups and then just add materials to one face at a time. It makes them easier to manipulate as you go along. So have a go at placing some materials onto a surface as well, and put up a tick once you've done that. Remember to double click on the object first. If I just place a material on a group, if I want to maybe grab some bricks or something for that wall, if I just choose a texture and place it on that wall while it's still grouped, it can be useful, but it'll place it on every face at once, and you won't have a lot of control on editing that material later. Whereas if I double click on the group first, activate the faces, I can then place the texture that I want with more control. Why that is important is so that we can modify materials one surface at a time, which especially for when we work on interior design, we would want to have that level of control. Now, again, double clicking on my group, I can select that face and then right click, go to texture, and I can modify that texture quite a bit. The little green grip there is a very handy one to modify things. We can scale our textures. We can do that very accurately as well by placing guidelines on our wall. If we wanted our bricks to be 100 mm high, we could place a guideline 100 mm up the wall and zoom or manipulate that until it reaches that point. You can also line up your brick or tile lines exactly with edges and corners, things like that, so that can be very, very handy as well. You do have quite a lot of freedom to modify your materials accurately. Just click away from that to close that command. Then if you want to copy that material to another face, again I'll just double click there so the surfaces are active. You click on the paint bucket tool and hold the Alt, or I think it's Command on a Mac, key, and you'll get the little eyedropper. So Alt is normally Command on a Mac and Control is normally Option, I think. So just try and modify your keys there. I can use the eyedropper to source that material and wrap it around the side there so that all that scaling and positioning that I did is matched as we go around that corner. Otherwise, if I went back to the original brick surface there, it's a slightly different scale, so the lines wouldn't quite line up. So lots of good materials, shortcuts and modifier keys there. The SketchUp training series on the channel on YouTube, SketchUp training series and paint bucket tool, is an exceptional tool, exceptional training video for all of the shortcuts on that. Now, I normally like to talk as well about groups and components and the difference between the two. If we group things together, it's literally just making a parcel or a packet out of that, those items, so that we can use a single click to select them, and so other things don't attach to them. I'm just going to move Stacey back into the room here. Notice when you're moving things, it's very, very important to have a clear starting point and end point for your move commands. So I'm deliberately clicking on the floor both times so I don't accidentally lift Stacey off into space, up off the floor. So the difference between groups and components, groups stay unique, whereas if we make a component, which I'll do very quickly here, I can triple click and go into make components, and I'll just call this box 1. All components have a name, so if you're making chairs or stools or tables, especially for layouts where you've got multiple occurrences of the same pieces of furniture, especially if you're doing a cafe layout, but even in a house if you're doing 6 dining chairs or something like that, or repeated parts of a building structure, posts, columns, balustrades, etc. Making them into a component has the following benefit. When we copy things, and we copy things using the Move tool, so I'll select the object, I'll click on the Move tool, and we use Control or Option as the modifier key. You'll see a little plus sign pop up next to your Move tool, and you can make a copy. Again, it's bottom left of my screen, it's saying place copied element or enter a value. So I can type in a value there, 1200, and enter. And then, so I've got 2 copies there. If I want more, I can literally just type in 4x, as in 4 times, and enter as many times as you want. You can copy something, so you can do multiples, multiple copies. Then, because that's a component, the difference now is that when we modify one of those, it's going to modify all of them at the same time. It saves time. If you don't want something, if you want something to stay unique, just make it into a group. If you want something to be traceable and trackable in a model and have become a family that is modified each time you make a change, you'll see that works with materials and textures as well. Then you want to make that into a component. And if I add some more materials there, you'll see that they update. Each instance of that component, if we wanted to break one of those and keep it unique, I could right click and explode it, and then I can also say now it's just back to individual geometry, lines, edges, faces that can be selected individually. All surfaces and faces in SketchUp are dependent on the edges that join them together. So if I delete one edge, you'll see that we do have hollow geometry there. It's an important part of the way SketchUp geometry works. It is actually hollow. So I can undo that. The other way to heal objects if you've accidentally deleted an edge is just to redraw the line. So now we've got a group of or a family of components there, first of all, and this last one is just individual geometry. But what I'll do, I'll make it into a group again. So it's a group, the other ones are components. You can right click on them, go to Entity Info to check what it is. It just says it's a solid group in the model. I haven't put it on a layer yet. I could do that in a minute. I could place them all on the furniture layer. But if I right click on one of these other ones, go to Entity Info, it's showing me that's a solid component, and it also gives me the name there, box 1. Gives a couple of other pieces of information about that. So now when we modify our named components, they change. The group one which we made individual, that remains unique and won't change at the same time as the others. It's good to save your work after all of these things. If you've been doing some of that along with me or just watching, that is fine. Another thing I really wanted to mention in today's workshop is styles, how we make SketchUp look on our screen. So styles are really just a collection of visual edge types, face types, and how the background imagery or colors work. So in the style I've chosen at the moment, so you access styles through your tray objects there, window, default tray and styles on a PC, or just window and styles on a Mac. So make sure you can see your styles and try swapping between a few different styles on your screen. There's all sorts of different types. Construction documentation there is different to the one that I was using. I like the landscape architecture style because I quite like having the ground plane and the sky that you can see there. You might not always want that. There's various styles, like I said, the one that we just chose that just gets rid of the background if you don't want the colours and shades of the earth and sky there. We can also use our view menu as well to control what we see on the screen. I could hide my red, green and blue axes. I could also hide any guidelines that I've done, so we start getting a more realistic look. I think you might have just lost your sound there. I think you've got a delay. It should come back. Good if it's back. Yeah, I can see there was a bit of a delay there. It might sound a bit funny for a minute when it's catching up. So when we modify and change our styles on the screen, one of the things that we can do is we can save any view that we've created in SketchUp. So if I like this 3D view, how do we save that in SketchUp? We do it using scenes. So you can change the way your styles appear. There's lots of them. You can explore these menus. There's lots of good sketchy edge styles, and you can modify them by clicking on edit or double clicking on each style, and you can change the way they display. It's a very powerful thing to know in SketchUp, is how to modify your styles. The default styles in SketchUp sometimes look a bit plastic, and it's one of the criticisms when people first start using it. They think, well, it doesn't look that realistic, but you can absolutely change the way your models display. I mean, you can even under the view menu, you can show and hide your edges as well. You can actually take the edges off your model to make them a bit less harsh. I'll just turn them back on. Once you've hidden them, you can't really select them until you show them again. With all your styles, you can either double click on the style or click on edit, and you'll see there I've got profiles ticked by default. Profiles adds some line weight or line hierarchy to the edges. If I turn those off there, it gets rid of that darker outside or back edge on each object, okay? So as I was saying right at the start, everything can be modified in SketchUp. So we can turn on or off our profiles. Think of profiles like a line hierarchy. And for the edge color as well, there's a range of options for that. If we keep them all the same, I like to use just a dark grey for the edges. It takes a little bit of the plasticky-ness out of it. You'll see there, I haven't hidden the edges, but they're a bit less conspicuous. It's still actually good to be able to see them a lot of the time, but you don't want them to dominate the view. Each style will display differently, but you have control over all these elements. If you wanted to, for instance, you can choose by material for your edges as well, and it will sort of take on the material properties instead of a particular color. So always good to save your work as you go, so that you're not losing what you work on. Always good to do that after every 1 or 2 commands actually to get into that habit. Now once you've got something looking the way you want on your screen, it's good to save that as a scene. So in terms of visual display today, we've been looking at layers, been looking at materials, and I know I've gone through all that quite quickly, but feel free to pause and watch back on any concepts that I've gone fairly quickly over. But this really gives you control about how your SketchUp model is going to display. To save any set of information that you've got on your screen, you can save that as a scene. So again, under window menu, default tray, and just make sure scenes is ticked, or straight under the window menu if you're a Mac user, just make sure that scenes is checked, and you'll see the little scenes tray pop up. Very similar to layers in the way that you can just add or remove them. You can also update them if you make any style changes to them. The geometry always updates automatically. So if I click on the plus sign there, it says scene 1. Always name your scenes. Now the scene tray can be really long. Sometimes you've got to scroll down to find where you can name your scene. So I'll just call this perspective 1. Obviously give them meaningful names. If you're doing a big project and it's got a kitchen and a lounge room, name those perspectives per room and per view. Give them meaningful names. When you work in a team environment, someone else is going to want to be able to find your scenes. If you have scenes 1 to 50, it's going to be pretty hard for someone to sort out what's what. And just hit enter once you've typed in a scene name, otherwise it won't necessarily register. So that scene is saved there. If I navigate away from that, and you'll see your scenes pop up top left of your screen if you're on a PC, or top middle if you're on a Mac, just above your working window. So if I zoom and scroll and do whatever I want when I'm working, I can always click back on that scene and it'll just rotate nicely back to what I had there before. Okay, so a couple of more view settings. It's a bit of a theme we're following today on SketchUp. Is under our camera menu. we can change the way our models display. We can change from the standard perspective view to parallel projection. It looks a bit distorted. It's a bit more of like an isometric view. And speaking of isometric views, we have an ISO button in our standard views toolbar, the little row of houses at the top. That's now a true isometric with 30-degree edges and vertical lines there. So we can save our isometric scene there if I want to save that one as well. You can always pan and zoom to make your scene fit the screen nicely as well. I might actually just hide my guides and axes for that particular view as well. And then under scenes, just make sure you can see your scenes tray. And like I said, you have to sort of scroll right down to get to the name of the scene. I'll call that isometric 1, because I might make a few others, and hit enter to make sure it saves it. So now we can swap quickly between our perspective view there and our isometric view. Now, another thing which I would like to save is a plan view. So now that we've turned off our perspective, and the guidelines are showing again now, I don't actually need them anymore. So I'm going to go to Edit menu. I'm going to actually delete those guidelines. You can also put them on a layer and hide them. That's all fine. For my plan view, and you can swap between elevation views, front views, you can see why the views toolbar is so powerful, because we can quickly create elevation or section type views just at the click of a button. Now a plan view here, this is going to be quite useful. We could also, if I didn't want to see the colours there, I can go back to select another style, and I could just go to, say, my hidden line view. Will give me a pretty good black and white floor plan there. So I'm going to save that as my floor plan view. The free modelling version of SketchUp, or without going into the extension called Layout, it's not really designed for doing construction information with full sets of dimensions. It's designed so that you can't really do that. You can do that through the Layout extension. But you can get pretty good basic floor plans like this together. It's not a full construction documentation package just in SketchUp itself. That's what the layout extension is for, but that's a pretty good looking floor plan for now. So I can save that as another scene. I've changed the style there to get rid of the colours and materials. So if I click on add a new scene there, I'm just going to call this one again. You might need to scroll down to find the name of it. Floor plan, and hit enter. So I can quickly swap now between my perspective, which is going to show me some materials, and my floor plan, which is just a basic black and white plan. If I didn't want to see, because we've got our two-dimensional Stacy there, I could actually hide that layer. So if I go back to my floor plan scene there, what I can then do, I'll just collapse a few of these trays, I've got a few open. So I can hide the people layer, and there we don't see the line representing the person there now. And then back under scenes, I could actually, with floor plan selected, I can click on update scene and things to update visible layers. So yeah, that should then update that scene to save it without the person being visible. She should be visible in the other scenes, but not in the floor plan, because what I did was I hid that layer, came back to scenes, clicked on the one that I wanted, and clicked on update that scene. A good thing to practice this week, I plan on doing this tool in next week's workshop as well, as we go back to our perspective view here. So I wanted to introduce the Follow Me tool to anyone who hasn't used it before. Follow Me tool is a tool, one of the best tools in SketchUp, I think, one of the most powerful. Let's give myself a bit of working space here. It relies on a path, And Nikki, have you used this tool before? Do you know the Follow Me tool? You need a path of connected lines there. That path, well, it's ideal if that path sits on the same plane. And then what we can do, I might create a circle to drag along this path. Now, when you click on your circle tool, it's going to default to want to draw a flat circle on the ground. If you tap your arrow keys on your keyboard, left, right, up, down, you'll find one that aligns perpendicular, so at 90 degrees to the path you've created. So again, if I just sort of scroll through using my arrow keys, I can see that the one that's perpendicular to the red axis there is going to work for this. So it's important that the profile that you create is perpendicular to your path. Once we've created a path and a profile that's connected to it at 90 degrees or perpendicular to it, to select the path, I just did that by doing a swipe with my selection tool. The push-pull tool, the Follow Me tool is right under the push-pull tool. So we can click on Follow Me. Because I already selected the path, it's prompting me down the bottom of the screen saying select the face to extrude. It's going to extrude that face along that path. Okay, now that's obviously very handy for railings, balustrades, any number of architectural details, skirting boards, cornices, things like that. And really the list of uses is endless. I've seen good pipe work and all sorts of things done with this function. We can also make the path more complicated. I'm going to use my 2-point arc tool here. Again, if I was doing this accurately for a project, so with the 2-point arc tool, you can click on one line. Once it goes pink, it's going to tell you it's tangent to that edge, so meeting it smoothly as a curve. If I do a double click at the end of that little arc, it will actually trim that off or fillet that. If you're going to be really accurate, use guidelines first to do a bit of setting out. Draw guidelines on the ground first, or whichever plane you're working on. You can set things out as accurately as you want to, and you should do that for any complex path type arrangement. You can set out as many guidelines as you want to create your path, rather than trying to just do it with the drawing tools. And then, look, we can even make that path more complex. I'm just going to do a few things here. I'll make it go vertical there, and then I'm going to delete that end part of that line. So we can actually create paths that span several directions. Again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a careful swipe with my selection tool, selecting that. Haven't got the last bit, so I'm going to use my Shift key, click on the last bit of the path there. So it's all in blue now, the path. I've selected all the bits I want. Once I click on the Follow Me tool, it's going to prompt me to select a face, and it's just going to drag it along that path. The other way to do it, if the path and the face are nicely connected, you can literally just click and drag with the Push-Pull tool, and it should extrude along that path, but it's a bit more manual. You just have to do that gradually. I prefer to select the path first, then click on the tool, then click on the face. So practice with that tool, the Follow Me tool. I can also share a link for that one. Again, the best source for those particular tools, I think, is in the SketchUp training series on YouTube. They'll actually take you through all of those individual tools one at a time. So the Follow Me tool, I'll link to that one, is just there. Easy to find on lynda.com and YouTube. The SketchUp YouTube channel, I recommend sticking to their licensed training videos, just because they're so specific. They're written by their people that they pay either in-house or as contractors to create their training videos. They're short, they're concise, they give really, really good tool tips. So we've reached the top of the hour. Thank you very much for those watching the recording, and Nikki for joining us live for this session. I hope that was useful. There's plenty of points that you can recap on, plenty of things you can re-explore. We covered a fair bit of ground, modelling accurately, using dimensions to check things, using our tape measure tool to offset guidelines firmly recommend getting used to using that. And then we explored the difference between groups and components. We applied some materials to our faces, and then really visual output was something I wanted to focus on today. So we covered styles and scenes. So feel free to explore those more in your own time. Don't swap too quickly between too many styles. Your computer will get a bit freaked out sometimes, but there's lots of good sketch line styles in SketchUp as well that sort of give you an idea that you can create some pretty good hand-drawn effects using the software. I tend to always, no matter what style I choose, I'll probably click on edit and do a little bit of modifying of that style within there as well, because you'll see that some of the detail is being lost in this one. But you can modify these styles as you go. All right, so I think we'll wrap up that workshop there. Practice in your own time. Use the free resources on the SketchUp website, especially the ones I was talking about at the start of the lesson. Their YouTube channel and lynda.com, the SketchUp Essentials series, will get you up and running and be able to recap on a lot of the same skills that we'll cover in the workshop series. So thanks everyone for your time and attention, and see you in the future workshop very soon.